Okay, this episode is about... Oh shit, I actually didn't check. What is this episode about? I've got a story here on situationships. I've got a side chick situation here. And I've got a women over the age of 30s type story here. Okay, this episode is about boundaries. Because some people need to know them, some people need to understand them, and other people need to respect them. And I think that kind of encapsulates everything so far, because it's a little bit hard to try and find something else that actually matches in all of the things that I'm about to talk about. But then again, when I kind of think about it, it's not like I was trying to look for these stories based off of which one matches which. I'm just handling stories based off of which one came earlier than the other. Although, with all of that said, before I can get into any one of the things that I mentioned talking about, I want to first start by calling out some of the biggest cock blocks I have ever seen on planet Earth, and that is the Olympics. Now, apparently, there are anti-sex beds that have arrived Paris for the Olympics after horny athletes admitted to orgies amid previous competitions. Now, seeing a title like this, I'm kind of thinking, like, while we can understand that some of these athletes are married and probably they're not promoting infidelity and shit, like, why deprive people of sex? How is it that it's that big of an issue for you guys that you have to get anti-sex beds? Am I the only one that feels like this is a little excessive?
The royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
As in, I don't even think nuns, the people that will practically go and swear to God that they're not going to fuck anyone or anything else, they don't have anti-sex beds. But the Olympics are like, you know what, we need to get some of our own. And granted, this isn't even the first time it's happened. When they were doing the Tokyo Olympics, that's, I think, when they actually brought up the idea of the anti-sex beds. And I've never fully understood why it is that this is such a good idea for people to take up. Yet, for the most part, it's not like it's something that really helps the athletes. But anyways, before I can give my full thoughts on it, let me just read the caption that came with this story. So it says, and I quote, "Anti-sex beds have arrived in Paris for the 2024 Olympics designed to deter athletes from intimate activities. The twin-size beds made by Airweave leave little room for closeness. Similar beds were used in the 2020 Tokyo Olympics. Despite the small size, wild stories of Olympic sex have persisted over the years. Matthew Syed, a table tennis player, recounted his experiences in the 1992 Barcelona Games, saying, and I quote, "I got laid more often in those 2.5 weeks than in the rest of my life." End quote. However, cardboard beds are unlikely to deter the athletes, with one competitor claiming a hot tub orgy took place 1 year. End quote. And end of story. Now, I think that last statement is the one that kind of took it for me, because when you kind of think about it, for the most part, like, how much deterring are you really going to do when these guys really want to do it? Because they're athletes. Unlike most of the regular human beings, you find that they have done some sort of mobility training. You find that some of those athletes are particularly flexible. And for the most part, it's not like, okay, minus maybe weightlifters and like very heavy people, it's not like they really will be bouncing with that much force when they're doing the do. Then on top of that, these guys are acting as though you can't just move the mattress to the floor. Like, are we going to have anti-sex floors as well though? You kind of have to think about that as well. Then, just like the last statement had said, it's not like it's the only place people can have sex. There's the floor, there's even the bathroom. And for the most part, like, I know that there's supposedly this belief system and sort of pseudoscience behind not having sex before a competition, but anyone who's paid a little bit more than just some attention to modern fitness science knows for a fact that beyond you not having sex or having any sexual activity for a week, your testosterone comes back down to normal and sometimes even below normal levels. So you staying without sex for like anywhere beyond 6-7 days actually doesn't really help you from a competition perspective. Although then again, maybe there is something else to it that I don't know. Maybe it's because I'm not into fitness or an athlete, so probably I don't entirely understand why. Either way, I'm going to drop that story and begin the podcast in a much better way that does not involve as much cock blocking, because I at least like to open the doors by saying, welcome to the Breakdown Podcast, where I talk about love, sex, and relationships from a guy's perspective, as well as a bunch of other guy shit. The man on the mic is a man who just can't seem to understand How the hell is it that the place with the 5 biggest holes on the planet contains some of the biggest cock blocks we've ever heard of? I honestly can't understand it. He's a man who utilizes running his mouth as a part of his cardio. It is none other than your tall, dark, and mildly handsome man, Sir Denver B. This episode has started with way more cock blocking than should be necessary, especially when you're talking about competition. Like, even when guys are trying to get some, or even when there's a bunch of guys that are busy trying to hit on a babe or a couple of babes, I don't think there's usually this much cock blocking. I think beyond nuns, this is probably the highest level of cock blocking that we've ever heard of, at least as far as my knowledge is concerned, and I honestly don't even get why. I think some of those athletes might actually be happier or might even perform better if they got some. But then again, like I said, probably there's something I don't know. Either way, thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope you listen all the way till the end. And if you do want to give your feedback, first link in the description is the link that you can hit if you want to reach me directly. And if you want to hit me up on social media, then I will be talking about that in a bit, because this is the Friday episode, meaning that I usually get to take a deep dive into Twitter, pull up a couple of tweets and break them down a little bit. And it is one of those episodes where you can suggest the tweets that I can talk about, and whether it's on X, whether it's on Facebook or IG, and I will explain how you can do all of that in a bit. It is something that you can do, and the drill on how to do this is pretty simple. Almost sounds like a song, and it kind of goes like this. You see that tweet, you like that tweet, you want us to discuss that tweet, you send that tweet. You send it to the DMs of @BagakaTheD, which happens to be my personal X handle, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. If it happens to be a screenshot or a screen grab or ended up on a reel on Facebook or on IG, then the place to send it to is @TheBreaktime_podcast for IG and @TheBreaktime_podcast for Facebook, and I will take it from there and I will handle it accordingly. Now, I have a couple of tweets that I want to get into, which all revolve around relationships and boundaries and shit. But before I can get into that, I want to talk about guys for a bit. More so masculinity, because if there's one thing that is never fully understood or defined properly, it's masculinity. Which is odd. Like, people talk about being gender fluid, but masculinity tends to seem like one of the most fluid things out there, because its definition and its understanding, or at least how people try to gatekeep it, usually tends to flip-flop around every so often, and we never fully get an understanding of whether one thing is masculine or not. And in the case that I want to put out here, there's a clip that I saw online where some guy was busy asking if a straight man can tell another straight man that he looks good without it being a problem, and the people on that particular podcast seemed to feel some type of way, while one of the guys was like, yeah, there's nothing wrong with it. So I'm gonna play the clip for you, then I can get into my thoughts on it. So without further ado,
my homeboy look good, and I said, boy, you look good, boy.
No, don't say it like that.
Oh, that's my brother.
It is something wrong with that. It is something wrong with that. Like,
It's
you
a
serious?
lot.
It's a problem telling another man on cameras in front of people. Yo, man, you look fresh. Ain't no wrong
Fresh,
with that.
that's a good word.
That's cool.
Fresh.
Can't use trigger words, man.
Like good.
Like good.
You say trauma words, right?
I said trigger words.
Trigger words. So that mean that, are you traumatized by me telling you look good? I didn't never thought that it was a bad thing to say, Scrap, you look good. If I look at you sometimes, I'll be like, but dog look good.
No, he gave you a word.
Well,
Fresh,
y'all look fresh.
fly.
If I say fresh, that's your outfit look fresh, but you as an individual,
Nah.
I'm so heterosexual that I can't see a diddy bone in my body.
Can you not have a diddy word in your mouth?
Think about it. That's a metaphor. I ain't got a diddy bone in my body.
No, listen.
And
No,
Puff ain't never put his
listen.
bone in me.
No.
okay. Diddy jokes aside, I find it very interesting how people like to gatekeep masculinity on a regular, and it's like the goalpost on what's considered masculine, what isn't, is always being moved around a little bit here, a little bit there, sometimes a massive jump, sometimes a little bit of a step here and there. And to be honest, it seems very baffling that people in this day and age are feeling some type of way about saying that their homie, another guy, looks good, even though they're not the homie, even if it's just a simple stranger. Like, acknowledging that something looks good, I don't think is particularly feminine or needs to imply any sort of sexual interest or arousal. And I'm saying this as someone that has been hit on by gay guys before. Like, at the end of the day, even when a straight guy tells me, yo bro, you look good, I'm like, you know what, thank you. even though he's not the target demographic, even though it's a stranger on the street or even a close friend of mine, me being told you look good is pretty normal and pretty nice. Like, there's nothing wrong with it. Of course, at the end of the day, it will always come down to context and how you say it, as opposed to just what it is that you say. If you say, hey bro, you look really good, my man, like, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're like, baby, you look fine as fuck though, like, at that point in time now, it automatically now might make me start to feel a little bit weirded out. I might start to feel some type of way because I'm like, thank you, but just so you know, I don't play against the home team like that. But evidently, I think there's nothing wrong with complimenting people. I don't think there's anything wrong with guys complimenting other guys. And honestly, this whole gatekeeping masculinity thing is just tiring sometimes. Like, it's almost like when you tell your homies you love them and people are telling you to add no homo right after that so that it can show that you're not gay. Like, me caring about my homies doesn't mean that I automatically want to fuck them. And if anything, this is the kind of shit that exacerbates the idea that all that men are interested in is pussy or some version of sex, where it's like, oh, you know, if I tell my homie that I love them, then it probably means I want to fuck them. Like, if I go and I meet with a young girl and she's like a 6-year-old kid and I'm like, oh, you look very beautiful, am I supposed to add no pedo? Like, the fuck? Why do we gatekeep masculinity so much, and then all of a sudden when people look at us as nothing more than these objects, these people that are only ever interested in sex and booze and nothing that deep or meaningful, all of a sudden we're like, oh, you know, there's more to men than that. You guys are the ones that are looking at us badly, blah, blah. Maybe you guys should shift your worldview. Like, we should be shifting our worldview so that they can follow suit. If we're much more comfortable in our masculinity, such that saying that we love our homie or that they look good without adding no homo afterwards, then maybe they'll also accept that masculinity goes beyond just the things that some people might take wrongly or might automatically assume is gay. Although, then again, that's just me and my thoughts on it, and you can tell me about it after the episode. But for now, I am going to move into the tweets and get this ball rolling. So on to our very first tweet of this episode, which was posted up by a woman who said, and I quote, "Y'all should differentiate a relationship and a situationship so that you stop saying that you're in a relationship. I made it clear that I am single until I find someone that'll pop the question. I'm open to meeting other people as he is also open to meeting other people." End quote. Okay, in this world, and to be more specific, this time and age where people have so many labels for stuff that isn't a relationship, I actually sort of agree with what she's saying, but I also understand why some people might feel differently about it. Because you find that when you kind of look at situationships, they are, in a lot of instances, sort of like a lighter, almost like a diet version of a relationship, where it's like a lot less of the drawbacks and, you know, a lot more of the nicer things, the benefits and so on. So for some people, they can actually take a situationship to almost be like, if not already be, a relationship. Now, situationships, of course, will vary in what they kind of are and what kind of situationship you're in. It can be a friends with benefits that turns into something bigger, or just the two of you screwing. But essentially, like, a situationship is not a relationship. It can be a lighter version of a relationship, but it's not a relationship per se. There is no directly implied commitment that has been given at that point, so you can't entirely stake as much claim as in a relationship. And while situationships can benefit a lot of different people, you find that because you're not in a relationship, sometimes the protections of the boundaries of commitment that a relationship has will not be something that you enjoy because you are not in a fully flung relationship. A pretty good example is, say, me as a guy, I'm dating this babe and I seem to like her, but I'm not in a relationship with her, and we've been doing this thing for a while. We've been thinking for a bit, we've been in a situationship for, let's say, like 2-3 months, and we start having a couple of issues and we're suddenly not talking to each other as much. And let's say, for example, we go for this social thing and I start talking to and even flirting with another babe, and she starts getting all up on me. Like, the babe that I'm in a situationship with can probably come and lose her shit, but she doesn't have as much power to do that. Like, she gets to lose her shit as who? she's not my girlfriend, if you get me. And this is something that can also happen the other way around. I can be a guy that is in a situationship with a babe who's busy flirting with another dude, and I feel some type of way, but I really can't lose my shit as much because I don't really have that sort of stake as someone in her life that can actually bring myself and be like, why are you talking to my woman? I'm not the boyfriend, so I can't exactly say, quote unquote, my woman. You get me? Also, people use situationships as an easy in and out of situations where it can feel like a relationship. So if you get tired of someone, you don't necessarily have to be like, oh, you know, I'm done with you, let's not do this anymore. There's people that'll just ghost you and start having a thing with someone else, or they can start having a thing with someone else even when they're with you, and you can't necessarily call it cheating. And at the same time, it's not like you can come back and be like, you know, why didn't he at least tell me that he didn't want to be with me? Now, a lot of these things and how you handle them will come back to courtesy and how much care you have for someone else, which is why you will find assholes being very open to ghosting. You will find people that do not care as much about you, you know, having a situationship but still entertaining other people. So if you want the full protections and the benefits that come with being in a relationship, then it's better for you to get into a relationship than to stay in a situationship. If you're in a relationship, because there is a recognized sense of agreed commitment, you can have the sort of powers, or at least you can have the sort of protection whereby you can go and act protective with your partner, and you can go and demand for things from your partner and request for more accountability, or just quite simply demand more accountability because you are in an agreed upon commitment, as opposed to a situationship where it's sort of agreed upon but you don't really have that sort of recognized presence or quote unquote power that would come with the boundaries of a relationship. Although then again, I might be wrong about that, but I am going to leave it at that and move it on to our very next tweet of this episode, which was posted up by a guy who said, and I quote, "Don't you just hate it when a side chick doesn't understand her role or her place? 1. As a side chick, you are not allowed to fall in love with me. 2. As a side chick, you are not allowed to post me on any platform. 3. As a side chick, you should remain silent forever. 4. As a side chick, do not initiate a call or a text. If I miss you, I'll call you." End quote. Okay, I've been very fortunate. Can I really say fortunate? But I've discussed the whole concept of being a side piece, whether you're a side chick or a side dude, and the rules behind it and what goes into it quite a bit on this podcast. I've probably spoken about it at least 3 times, if I'm not wrong. And honestly, I think, if anything, I have a lot better of an understanding on the different rules and regulations of being a side piece that are there. Not necessarily just because I've spoken about them, but because I've also been a side piece before. Granted, it was for a short period of time and, you know, feelings were caught, blah, blah, blah. But, you know, that's a story for a different time and day. But all in all, there are rules to being a side piece. There's a lot of people that don't recognize that, but there are sort of hidden and mostly unspoken rules to being a side piece. Now, whatever the hell this guy said, where it's like you're not allowed to fall in love, or you're not allowed to post me on any platform, you should remain silent forever, and, you know, you shouldn't initiate a call, might seem like, you know, hidden rules. I think there's more to it than this. These ones are a little bit on the extreme end, and it's very just centered on the guy. But there are more or less general rules to being a side piece that I think anyone who is intending on doing it, not that I advocate for it or endorse it, will definitely have to follow. And fortunately, I discussed this in episode 436, which is Side Piece 101 for dummies. And the very first rule is don't be seen, just heard. So you should not be seen hanging around him, getting cozy with him and shit, you know, so that you can retain your place and you don't end up being dropped quickly because his babe, his woman, or his partner found out, or her partner. Then the second one is you have demands and no demands at the same time. Like, you can demand for stuff like material goods, and, you know, the person will probably say yes. And, you know, it's a pretty nice gesture and you can ask for that, but there are limits to it. There's things that you can ask for, there's things that you can demand for, but you won't be given. Like, if you ask for the person's time, or you ask for more attention, then it might not really be given to you. it's not something that you essentially have that much of a claim to demand. Although that one does tend to vary in terms of the sort of, relationship that the person cheating on their partner is having with you. Sometimes you can ask for it and they'll give it to you, but in a lot of cases, especially if it's mostly just for the pussy and the interest in getting the pussy, they probably can't give that to you. Also, there's some sort of extravagant things or extravagant expressions of love that might be there that they might not be open to doing. Like, say, for example, the girlfriend can ask for a road trip for their birthday, but for your birthday, it's not like you'll be like, oh, I think we need to start doing more road trips, or I want you to take me to the coast or to take me to the Masai Mara. Like, you can't ask for that shit as much. Like, not unless if that guy absolutely dislikes his woman, there's a pretty good chance he might not fund any of that shit. Then also, you've got no support from the friends. Like, that's one of those rules that side pieces tend to forget sometimes, because especially if that guy or let's say the babe is busy, chilling with you whenever they're with their friends, regardless of what gender, regardless of what friends are there, you find that they may be accommodating, they may be nice to you, they may even say that, y'all are homies and y'all are good together. But in the event the partner finds out, if shit hits the fan, if there's a problem that is going on and the partner finds out about you, these people will not have your back, they will not support you. They will say that they were trying to tell the guy to not have a thing with you and try to fix things. They will talk about how, they didn't endorse it, but because it's their friend, they couldn't stop chilling with them. They will talk about how, they don't even understand what your role is and why it is that, you're busy interfering with a good relationship, blah, blah, blah. Whether it's a wife, whether it's a girlfriend, whether it's a fiance, like, the moment the friends are there and shit hits the fan, they will never take your side. So you're essentially on your own there. Then last but not least, you're probably not the only one. There are instances where you find that there's a guy that has multiple side chicks, there's a babe that has multiple side dudes, and especially if it's mostly for the casual benefits, so like the casual sex, short-term flings and so on, you're probably not the only one, or you might not be the only one. And even though you are the only one, it's not like it's that hard for you to get dropped and for someone else to get picked. And on top of all of that, you are a side piece for a reason, not the main. And the moment you start trying to act like the main is the moment that you could start getting yourself booted out of being a side piece, because at the end of the day, you are a side piece, not the main. Act like a side piece, not like the main, regardless of your feelings. All right. And with that said, I am going to sort of end it there and not give too much, because I've given 5 rules plus a bonus. So I can move it on to our very final tweet of this episode, which was posted up by the guy known as Amerix, who said, and I quote, "Men, retired war veterans will always try to hoodwink clueless men. Don't save a woman, you are not Jesus. Don't accept to be a woman's retirement scheme. If she didn't prioritize you in her 20s, don't prioritize her in her 30s. You deserve better." End quote. And this was actually in response to a clip where the TV presenter known as Betty Chalo said, and I quote, "Women in our 30s, we make very good partners in relationships because we have had a lot of experience. We have been through a lot in life." End quote. Okay, I don't know. Maybe it's just me, but I feel like the whole, war on women that are above the age of 30 thing, because they supposedly ran through thing, is a little played out. I feel like at this point in time, we shouldn't be making this much noise about them. Like, let's be very honest about this, because at what point are we going to come back and suddenly understand that this form of quote-unquote relationship purgatory is not helping anyone at this point? And, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that they're in the same exact place in the dating market as people who are in their 20s or even in their 40s. It's not like I'm saying that, they are all great and they're all amazing people and we should date all of them, because they're not. But it doesn't mean that we should all of a sudden try and round them up and throw them into this sort of dating market purgatory where every guy should avoid them. And don't get me wrong, I fully understand the value in dating early and dating long term from a very early age and continuing on to the point where you get married, whether it's earlier, whether it's later, and having a bunch of kids and a white picket fence and so on and so forth. Don't get me wrong, like I understand the value in that, and a lot of the people that started dating super early and have dated for a very long time do tend to make particularly good partners, even though they end things somewhere later on in life, or even when they get married. Like they do actually tend to make for pretty good partners, as opposed to people that are in fairly short-term relationships and move from one relationship to the next every so often. But with that said, I think part of the human experience is understanding the value of second chances, understanding the value of moving beyond a situation that might not have been good for you. Now, I'm not saying that, you should use that philosophy and leave every single relationship when things are getting thick or skinny in my situation, but when it comes down to it, like, you can't automatically package an entire age set of women from 30 going up as used and damaged goods that should not be picked up again because they didn't prioritize you in your 20s. That almost sounds like you are butthurt because you didn't get the attention from the women that you wanted in your 20s. To which, if that's the case, it's a lot easier to deal with you being butthurt than it is to ostracize an entire age set of women just because you went through a bunch of rejection when you were a young man. Because honestly, even if you were rejected in your 20s and you were passed up on by a lot of women that you were interested in, and they instead went for older guys or for guys that possibly had more means, at the end of the day, if you are in your 30s or if you're in your mid or even your late 20s or just older, at that point, if you are getting more female attention, then what it is that they do or what it is that they did to you shouldn't bother you anymore. Like, yes, rejection hurts, but guess what? There's a pretty good chance that you might have also rejected a woman that was interested in you. Does it mean that she should treat you like shit later on in life because, she's all of a sudden married and she's with someone that cares about her? Or, you used to treat her like shit and now she's in a much better relationship? Does that mean that she should now start talking to you like a piece of shit and say that you are not marriage material? Like, at the end of the day, even though you could say that maybe they may not make for the best partners because maybe they're a bit headstrong, maybe they desire a little bit more autonomy as they've grown and learnt more about themselves and what it is that they want, like, you could argue all of those things out, but at the end of the day, it doesn't necessarily mean that they'd be bad partners. Some of them are very, very good partners. Maybe they were just in bad relationships for a long time. Maybe some of them, like you said, were hoes and they were giving it up in their 20s. That also exists, and there are some women that do that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that every single woman that is 30 plus and isn't married or isn't engaged or isn't in some sort of a relationship is in that position because they used to hoe around and they didn't choose a good guy or the most ideal guy when they were much younger. Or maybe I'm just wrong about this shit and I'm just defending 30-year-olds because there's a couple of them that are fine as fuck nowadays. Either way, I want your thoughts on it. The DMs are open. On X, it is at Bagaka the D. On Facebook and on IG, it is at the Breaktime Podcast and the Breaktime_podcast, respectively. You can also hit me up via the link in the description. Thank you so much for listening all the way till the end, and I will catch you guys on the next break.
But what I believe is that if you put a pastor and a prostitute in one room, one is likely to convert the other.